Okay, so now what we're going to look at is we're going to start to look at performance analysis for our organisation. And what that really involves is gathering formal and informal data to help us start to come up with understanding how we're going to achieve our goals or what's preventing us achieving our goals. Okay, so what it's really about is performance analysis uncovers, it's about finding several perspectives on what's going on with our business. We're looking at what's, it's gathering up all the different drivers or all the different aspects that are either helping us to achieve our goals, so what's driving us, barriers preventing us moving forward, starting to understand, well, what could be done about that, so coming up with a bit of a solution system, and really trying to it is part of understanding what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so we need to know what we're trying to achieve, how that's going to happen, what's preventing us from achieving those goals, what's driving us towards those goals, and what we can do about that to either remove the problems or to start working on how we can make the most of opportunities there. All right, so what we start to look at there is we start to look at, we need some sort of methodology. Okay, so we need some sort of methodology about how we're going to gather that information. When are we going to gather it? How are we going to gather it? What is the information going to be? And also, eventually we're going to start thinking about what are we going to do with that information once we have it. But the first part is to have some sort of system or platform that's how we operate. Okay, we need to start thinking about our industry performance. Okay, so when we're looking at the sector and having a look at how they're doing, so we're going to look at that. We're going to look at our competitors. Okay, so we're going to start to understand, well, what are the competitors doing? How are they achieving their goals, etc. We're going to have to also have a look at opportunities and threats to us. Okay, so there's outside influences or outside, things that we can take advantage of or things that are going to really ruin our day. We need to think about our business performance metrics. Okay, and what that's starting to look at when we're talking about metrics is our measurements. Okay, so we need to see, well, what are we measuring? How are we measuring it and what's that going to be? And then we need to look at cost benefit as well. So we start to look at, there's a few things that we're going to have to look at when we start to think about our performance analysis. So really what we're looking at is understanding what the performance measurements are. Business performance management, it has three activities that we're really looking at here. And the first one is understanding or selecting the goals for our organisation. Okay, so if we know what's going on out there and we know what the lay of the land is, we can start to come up with a few ideas about, well, what do we want to achieve? Okay, so it allows us to select appropriate goals, realistic, achievable goals. We start getting into the gathering or gathering of measurement information relevant to an organisation's progress against those goals. So we start to think about how is that going to be measured, what information do we need to put through our measurement systems, and ultimately what's going to be done with that. So who's the audience that's going to receive that? And then it also allows us as managers to sort of intervene in light of that information with a view towards improving our future performance against those goals. Okay, so ultimately what it really boils down to is we need to get that information and do something with it. Okay, there's no point gathering information that just sits there. Okay, so this is really about giving our managers or ourselves the opportunity to go and then do something with that and make intelligent business decisions. Okay, so although we're sort of talking about those sequentially, that there are those three things, what we're really looking at doing is actually a combination of multiple things at once. So we're gathering information, we're acting on that information, we're gathering information, we're acting on it, we're understanding what we need to collect, and it's an ongoing cycle. Okay, so it's not just a linear progression where we do one thing, do the next thing, do the next thing, rinse, repeat. We are continually gathering that information, we're continually acting on that information after measuring it and continually implementing things to drive us forward. Okay, so that's the key part, is understand that it is circular in nature, not linear. Okay, so why do we need to measure these things? Well, the first thing is we start to evaluate business decisions. Okay, so we need to be able to think, well, what do we want to do and is it achievable? We've set out with our business plan, we've started to implement the business plan, we now need to know, well, does it work? Is it going to work? What's past performance indicated? Have we tried it in the past and what were the results? Okay, we want to be able to control processes. So we have policies, systems and procedures in line in our business that we've set up. We now need to know, well, if we do these things, what has historically been the outcome. Okay? We need to budget for success in the right areas. And what we're talking about there is we need to think about, well, we've only got a limited spend of money within our organisation. So where do I want to put that money or assets that's going to have the biggest bang for buck? Okay? I also need to be able to motivate employees. People don't want to come to work every day and do their job and then they go home and they don't, you know, after a while I get a feeling of, well, you know, does what I do matter? We need to be able to track that for them and show them that this is what you did and this was the outcome of that. Okay, so the stronger we can show the link between cause and effect, the more rewarding they're going to find their job happens to be. And the other thing is we can start to reward them on that as well. Because when we start looking at things like bonuses or any sort of, you know, extra payments, we can justify where that's coming from. By having good performance analysis and by gathering that information, we can start to celebrate our accomplishments, okay? We start to see the benefits of what's happening with what we're doing. We're correcting problems as they come along. We're making things better and driving the company forward, and that's only going to have a great effect on allowing us to then celebrate the fact that we've achieved something, okay? But we need to be able to measure it and show it so that we can. And obviously when we do that, we promote our high achievers. We show people what's going on. We are able to use people as an example, and we can also speak to those people and find out what they've done to help create that. And then once we've got that information, cross-pollinate that across the rest of our employees and help us drive forward as a company. Okay? It also allows us to learn from our mistakes and our successes, okay? Because I don't want to paint a rosy picture to say that it's always everything goes forward and nothing ever goes backwards, because that's just not how business works. Sometimes you have some terrible outcomes and you know, it all ends in a burning wreck. But if you've got a really good system of gathering information, you can start to work out, well, what went wrong, okay? We can't fix things if we don't know what's happening. And a lot of this is about understanding what's taking place, okay? And if we can get a really good grip on what's happening in our organisation, we can actually start to build in some ways of dealing with that. Okay, so one of the things we're going to look at there is obviously is we need to think about, you know, well, KPIs are a big one, key performance indicators. We've certainly spoke about those before in this series. Okay, but we're looking at, well, you know, what's our target? Well, what was the goal? Okay, so when we set a key performance indicator, it might be a number of sales that we've asked people to achieve, and that could be a raw number of sales or a dollar figure. And one of the things that we start to look at is when we get close to our KPI, if we had the KPI was, you know, sell 100, what we might want to do is to say, well, okay, well, we've almost hit that, and we're measuring that on a constant basis. What can we put in place to stretch that out to 120? Okay, so how do we lift it? How are we going to drive that forward? What techniques in our measurement have we been using that have worked that allow us to now continually push that figure forward? Okay. Now that's not to say that we're changing the goalpost. Don't change the goalpost on your people. Don't do that. It has a really negative effect. Hey, I got the 100 you asked me for, so now you're asking me for 120. Okay. This is a stretch goal there to encourage and reward. Okay. Don't, as I say, don't get confused and think this is a great idea. Hey, I'm going to move those goalposts and shaft on my people. No, what we're doing is we're starting to have a look at, well, what's taken place. What worked? What did we bring in there in our performance analysis and the systems we had? When we spoke to our people, what did they say was working for them? And then based on that information, how can we drive that forward a little bit? Okay? Once they've achieved that a few times, they might be quite happy to keep doing it. All right? But what we then are able to do is now that we know what we've been achieving, because we've been measuring things really clearly, that's when it allows us to start thinking, well, okay, if we're selling 100 or 120, how does that match up to the other people in our area? Okay, so if I'm thinking of other industries in my sector, well, what's everyone else doing? Okay, now that's often very hard information to get a hold of. Our industry sector, it can be quite broad depending on your industry, and where you'll find that is usually coming from is there'll be a third party and analysts. There's quite a few different organisations that collect industry data. IBIS, for example, they sell a lot of that information. Like any secondary data, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. You always have to think about those sources, and you need to think about how much that's going to cost you to collect, but it can have some very good information in there that's relevant to what's going on in your industry sector. Okay, and when we talk about industry sector, we could be looking at those primary sectors, which we're looking at. Raw material, Australia has a large primary industry sector. So, mining, farming, basically pulling stuff out of the ground or growing stuff on the ground, pretty straightforward. Okay, secondary sector starts to involve things like refining, construction and manufacturing. So we have a large building industry as well, so that secondary sector is quite large. And then we start talking about tertiary sectors, which deal with services, law, medicine, education, distribution and manufactured goods, etc. Okay, so you have to think about, well, what sector you're in. As I say, pulling stuff out of the ground or growing stuff on the ground is pretty much your primary sector. Building things, constructing things, or refining and manufacturing, secondary. And then when we're thinking about services, that's when we start talking about tertiary sector. Okay, so what we'll have a look at is let's think about, if we've looked at an industry sector and see how that's performed, industry sector is quite large, it's quite broad, it covers quite a lot of territory, okay? You're starting to look national, and that might not give us exactly what we want. What we might need to do is start to look at our competitors. Okay, so this is when we start getting a little closer. So if I'm running my coffee shop on the street, I obviously have sitting across the street another coffee shop. Here's my cup of coffee, it's a really big one, we need those in the morning. Okay, now they're selling also coffee. Congrats, they're a direct competitor, okay? It doesn't get much more direct than that. So they're sitting there, we need to think about, well, how are they operating? If I can see they have 1,000 customers and they're making heaps of cash, and I have no customers, then I need to start taking a look at what's going on. If I have 1,000 customers and they have no customers, I might be having to think, well, what's going wrong? My cup of coffee I might be selling for the totally wrong price. Hey, you can have as many customers as you want if you're giving the stuff away for nothing. Okay, so sometimes that's a good sign or a bad sign. We can't necessarily take it from there. What we might also start thinking about is it could also be our indirect competitors. Okay, they might not be selling coffee at the shop over the road, but they might be selling something, a nice alternative coffee. They might have tea. There we go, nice little cups of tea. Now, a cup of tea isn't a cup of coffee, but how are they generally going? What's actually happening out there? Okay, we might also think about our, whether they're existing or whether they're future competitors. Okay, so if we can see they haven't opened yet, but that says coming soon, then we know that we're about to have some competition, and we might want to start to understand what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, because that's going to affect us. Okay, that's going to take away some of our share of wallet, because some of our customers are going to go over there. So we need to start doing our thinking and planning, and once again adjusting our figures, knowing that things are going to change. Okay, so one of the things that we need to start to do is to come up with that little bit of an array about the competitor array. Okay, so we'll just pop that down there. So a competitor. Okay, so we might want to know a little bit more about these people coming soon. So we might put together a very quick competitor array to work out what's going on. So we'll talk about, well, what is our industry? Okay, so we're in the coffee industry. Are they secondary? Are they in construction? No, not really. They're in a service, so it's you're probably looking at that tertiary industry. Okay, so we're starting to look at that. We start to look at, well, who's the competitors? All right, well, in this case, we'll use both of those, and we'll say there's two competitors for us, a direct that's coming soon and a secondary competitor that's existing. Okay, we start to think about, well, who are the customers? So if, who's the person walking down the street that's going to come to one of our shops? Who is this person in our local area? Okay. We might start to think about, well, what does that person expect? When they come in, what is it they want from that coffee shop experience? Okay? And then what we might start to look at also is we might start to go, well, what measures success in our industry? Okay, what are the key success factors? What are the things that have to be in place in order for us to achieve our goals and go from there? Is it just the sale of coffee? Is that where we make our money? Do we actually make our money on meals? Is it really about our saving on costs? Okay, what is it that's going to help us win or achieve our goals? So what's going to happen there? What are the key success factors? So we understand what the customer wants, we understand what's going on around us, then we're starting to think about, well, what are those success factors? And then we need to start giving them weightings. So we might say, look, sale of coffee for us, that's 70% of what we do. Okay, we might also sell meals, that might be 20%. And by the way, this is not guidance, this is just arbitrary numbers plucked from the sky. Okay, and we might say saving on costs is 10% of what we do. Okay, and then what we can do is we can start to rate, well, how do they operate? How are they making their money? What are their success factors? Okay, And then we can put it into a bit of a matrix and start to do a little bit of math about, you know, how we're achieving our goals, okay, and how close we are to achieving success and how they're going to operate, okay. So there's a bit more about that, but, you know, this just gives you that quick rule of thumb. You know, the key ones though, you know, who are they, what do they do, where are they? Are they a direct competitor, are they a secondary competitor? So how are we going to cope with that? You know, this person here is the key to it all. You know, if you can get the customer, understand really what they're about, that's going to really help you, and then you're going to be able to dominate that space and your business should come out on top, okay? Of course, we start to talk in terms of opportunities and threats, okay? So an opportunity and threat, you know, they can be interesting. They're not necessarily bad. Even a threat's not a bad thing. Sometimes it actually, you know, it creates an opportunity to do something different, okay, as we move and adjust. Okay, so things like company takeovers can be a bit of an issue. Economic conditions, you know, the stock exchange doesn't work the way it needed to. You know, all of a sudden everyone's losing money and bad things happen, no one wants coffee. Okay, we start to think about strategic alliances can sometimes create opportunities for us. Changes in technology can be a big thing. The expectations of the public, so when this person comes to the shop and brings their friends, you know, what are their expectations these days? It used to be, once upon a time, when I said I wanted to go for a coffee, I wandered down, I got a cup of nasty coffee for about $2 from a takeaway that also probably sold you a kebab or something else, and you got it and it was milky and terrible. And we used to think that was acceptable, but now if it's not some sort of single origin, perfectly handcrafted artisanal coffee, we get a little bit snarky and a bit upset, okay? We have changed over time. Okay, because competitors to those, you know, sort of mum and dad coffee operations, you know, those competitors have come out and started bringing a sophisticated product. Okay, so what those competitors and their competitive actions are really start to drive what's happening for the, you know, customers there. The other thing we might also have is, you know, a risk for us could be poor public relations development. Okay, if we're not dealing with those people, if we're not dealing with these people well, then that's going to have an effect as well and create a threat to us. Okay, so both opportunities and threats, we're really looking at external factors. Okay, so, you know, it's what's happening out there, it's not necessarily something that's happening within. Okay, so we need to think about how that's going to be, what it's going to affect, you know, the opportunity here. Okay, so the coffee shop coming across the road, that is a future threat. Okay, it can take stuff away from us. On the other hand, if these guys were closing down because everyone in the area decided they don't like tea, okay, so they're closing, look, I'm really sorry, see you later, no one wanted your tea, goodbye, okay, coffee's where it's at. What that does is, as that's starting to go, that's an opportunity for me to start to redirect those customers in quickly. And hopefully, what I can do is if I act fast enough, I can try and pull all the customers into my coffee shop in the gap between them closing and then opening. So yes, they're a threat, but there's an opportunity before these things happen for me to take advantage of. Okay, so opportunities and threats can be very closely linked. All right. Now, how are we measuring these things? Once again, we start to think about measuring our range of our own KPIs. And it might be, you know, it could be company share price. Okay, so particularly in the banking sector, they're all very competitive about who has the highest share price. You might start thinking about market share. So in our coffee shop, when we're talking about market share, okay, so to take the coffee shop example that little bit further, okay, if I'm looking at a market, I'm looking at, well, how many people were there? Okay, so it's a small community, there's only 5 people, so each one of these is going to have to represent some extra people. Okay, and here's my coffee shop, McAwesome. Okay, so I've got my coffee shop there. Over the road there's another coffee shop. Yep, these are the worst mushroom houses you ever saw. That's great. When we're looking at market share, we're saying, well, you know, how many of these people come to me and how many go to our terrible, not as good competitors, okay? These are the people, no good coffee. Everyone comes to us, obviously, because we're better, okay? So we might look at measuring the market share. So who has what? We might also look at measuring, well, you know, what are the number of customers here? So what's the market size, okay? How many do we deal with? Do we deal with, you know, how many customers a day? Well, I've got 3, but they come in 3 times a day, so I'm dealing with 9 customers a day. They have only 2 customers a day. Then they have, okay, so we can start to measure how many times we're serving people, how many people we serve, what our percentage of the market happens to be. We can start to look at, well, what's the profitability? Okay, like I mean, if I'm charging a lower price for my coffee, I might not actually be making as much profit on each. So I might have actually been better to sell to 2 people if I can sell really expensive stuff. Okay, and I can just measure also in sales in units or dollars. So how many cups am I selling each day? You know, how many funky little cups of coffee are going out of McNick's every day? All right. So how many am I actually selling becomes a thing there as well. Okay, so raw sale numbers. I can also measure my customer affinity. Okay, I can measure, you know, how satisfied they are. Yep, I satisfied that, but I've made that one unhappy. Okay, so my customer satisfaction is 66%. I might be looking at that. You know, on the other hand, these guys might be keeping them, you know, in varying amounts, so we can start to measure our customer service standards. Okay, so we can start to look at awareness. Okay, you know, of these customers who knew about which places. You know, oh yeah, we all know about your one, but we went to that one because it was closer to work. Or we've never heard of you. Okay, so did these people go here because they'd never heard of us? Did they go there because it was more convenient, or why? Okay, so we look at maybe wallet share, which is a share of spend across the area, and we can also look at, you know, what campaigns or what activities we've been running. Okay, so there's a fair bit there. You know, we might have our come and get our coffee campaign. We can measure whether that worked or not. Okay, so you know, if all of a sudden I have a winter special, and I've always had 9 people come in, when I ran the special, did I get 12? Did this number change in any way, shape or form? It becomes a good question. All right, so you know, things like your corporate share price can become a KPI. So we're starting to be able to, at this point, start to glean what's happening here. So we can start to look at, you know, what's our competitor measure? So how are we dealing against everybody else? Okay, so, you know, as I say, it could be the share prices used to excite us a lot back in the banking days. Okay, you know, what are we achieving? How's that working? But there's a few other little measurements, as I say, we can start to use. And one, you know, we start to look at is, you know, the purpose here is to generate wealth, to generate income, and to be able to track that, see what's working, see what's not. So there's a few other ways we can start to track that. We can start to have a look at, well, as I said, the market share. So what percentage of people are coming to us? Okay, market share, fairly straightforward. So we know we have 60% of the market, these people have 20% of the market, and these people have 20% of the market. Okay, so we can pretty quickly, pretty easily do that. Now what we start to look at is, you know, judging the success of that, that opportunity or that business based on, you know, how much of the market it has. Okay, so we are obviously doing something quite well. We have 60% of the market. Now we know that the market is only 5 people. So we're tracking, we say we own 60%. Now what will happen is, we know that if we move that to 70% and the market's only 5 people, these people had to come from somewhere. So we start to work out that if the market is only 5 people deep and we're starting to get more, we have to be pulling them off our competitors. Okay, so a gain for us is directly a loss to them. You know, it's, you know, unless the market's expanding, but generally if we say the market's fairly static, we're taking it away from our competitors directly. Same, if we start losing market share, we know those people didn't stop wanting coffee, it means they're going somewhere else. Okay, so we can measure the number of customers that are coming through the door. You know, that's one way to do it. As I say, we can look at the profitability. You know, how much, you know, if we're only making $1 a cup and they're making $2 a cup, well, maybe they just need to sell less cups anyway. So we need to start looking at what the profitability is there, and that comes down to, you know, the prices we charge. Okay, but the more profitable we are, the more that attracts investors to us. Okay, so assuming that and all other things being equal, you know, we look at our KPIs, look at our commissions, we look at what's going on as far as the funding. So, you know, the increase in sales means there's an increase in profitability. That's pretty much the rule of thumb. Yes, we might have increased production costs, but generally we're looking at taking it forward. Okay. Whether we get that customer stickiness becomes a thing. You know, of these 3, how much of them keep coming back to us becomes customer stickiness. You know, that starts talking about, you know, are they going to be repeat customers? Are we getting a churn through of different people all the time? Or are we getting the same people coming back to us? Okay, so we want to create a good relationship with these people so they keep coming in, stay satisfied with us, get that customer satisfaction, which is going to keep us going with loyal customers. Okay, we need to research the satisfaction and really start asking them what they're satisfied about and how we're meeting or exceeding their expectations. And if we can nail down those expectations, they'll keep coming back. Okay, now the reality is that you know, the higher we set our standard, a lot of the time, the higher the expectations on us. So what happens is if we're saying that, look, our service is, you know, we always aim to have a 9 out of 10 as a minimum, then, and when we push that to a high standard, well, the customers are now going to expect that high standard every time. And if we deliver a 7 out of 10, it's going to have a really negative impact because people are going to say that actually my experience is less than satisfying. Unfortunately, 9 out of 10 becomes the benchmark. Okay, so if we deliver less than that, that creates a problem for us. At the same time, if we say we're the cheapest, nastiest, you know, whatever, come and get a sloppy cup of joe off us, and they actually come in and we provide really good service, it's easier to impress. Okay, so we've always got this trade-off that if we set a high standard, the people are going to hold us to that standard every time. And if we come off less than that, it's going to create a problem for us. But by having a high standard, it might have attracted the customers in the first place. The opposite side of that is, you know, if you under-promise and over-deliver, that gets a lot of people excited by you. They'll keep coming back. But, you know, eventually over time, there's going to be that expectation. All right, so you need to maintain that, okay? So think about where you want to set these things, how you're going to measure it, how you're going to maintain it. Okay, we've talked about mind share as well, the awareness, okay, because we want to develop the awareness. Awareness can be good and bad. If we're known for we sell great cups of coffee, but geez, they're expensive, that can work against us a little bit. We want to be known for the right attributes. Okay, we're trying to maximize the popularity of our product so that the brand dominates. People go, oh, I want to get a coffee. I'm going there for sure, 100%. And we want to make sure they're not necessarily choosing these guys as their first choice. Okay, so, you know, it almost gets to a point where our name becomes synonymous with it. You know, people go, I'll have a Coke. Okay, now, when they say Coke, they don't necessarily refer to a glass of Coca-Cola. They're referring to, I'll have a Coke, which means it could be Pepsi, it could be any generic cola product, whatever, but the brand or the name Coke has become just such a big thing that people just ask for that by, you know, by habit. Same for Pepsi. What they're really asking for is a brown fizzy drink notionally tasting like cola. Okay, and it's not necessarily a Coke or a Pepsi, but it's funny because that's what they're asking for. And that is because they have the mind of the consumer. Okay, so, you know, that's pretty much how those things work. And we also just need to come down to now understanding, well, what's the cost-benefit analysis here? So when we're looking at that, we're trying to calculate how much risk is involved in each of our business decisions and what we're going to get out of it, okay? So, you know, if I could start to improve this business and I could put in, you know, I want to make this an even better store and I'm going to put 100,000 in, okay, and put a lot of time and money and effort into refurbishing my business, well, what am I going to get out of it? Okay, so if all there is I could spend a lot of money and all I'm going to do is make a very small margin, maybe 5%, you know, because the customers are already pretty happy, they're always fairly satisfied, everything's sort of working for them. I'm going to put a lot of money in, I'm going to risk it. Well, what am I going to get out of it? You know, if it's only that amount, well, what do I stand to lose? Because if it goes wrong, how long is it going to take me to recover that? So I might be starting to think about, well, you know, what are all the positives here? You know, what are the benefits? What can happen? You know, it might make people happier. They might move through quicker. Okay, there's a bodgy little clock. It might have better coffee that I can serve, maybe. Okay, and I need to think about all those factors. But on the other hand, I go, well, it might not be needed. They might not be all that happy. They might say, well, you know, it's not making things any quicker. It's still the same coffee. It's still the same people. So I need to then be able to make a decision, the positives versus the negatives, bearing in mind that I'm standing to risk a real amount of money. And if I get that wrong, that's a lot of cups of coffee I'm going to have to sell. So the key tip there is to make sure that we include all of the costs. Because it sounds like, yes, it's going to cost me that much to renovate, but it's not just that much to renovate. It's also the time as we inconvenience the customers while the place is being built, okay? Because it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to have tradesmen through our place. There's going to be a lot of busy activity. People can't come along and, you know, first thing in the morning get their coffee. I might be disrupting people for weeks. My staff might not know where things are. They might not be able to find things in a hurry, okay? So I need to really think about, well, what are all the negatives, not just the spend. Okay, so I really need to think it through, and then I need to also think about, well, what are the positives and go through them fairly well. Okay, once I've done that, then I can measure, I can identify the criteria and how to measure our performance. I can identify what my key performance indicators are for success. You know, what do I want? You know, what's going to work for me? You know, what are we saying? You know, if I do that, am I able to reset these numbers? If I do that, can I reset my price? If I do that, is that going to allow me to raise my expectation then to say, well, look, if we've spent all this money to get those people, then I'm going to say our new measure for success is, if I do this, well, our new KPI is we want 80% of the market. If I do this, then my KPI is, we do want 9 out of 10. Okay, we used to be 8, and now I'm going to reset my KPI and go for that. But obviously what I have to be doing is tracking that information, finding out what's going on, evaluating that information, making decisions based on that information, and continuing on that cycle and circle going forward, okay? So there's quite a lot of things going on there. That's a busy coffee shop. It can be scaled to any size business. Doesn't matter what sort of business you are, this pretty much remains true. There's customers, there's competitors, there's an industry, there's an environment, and there's things that we need to track to see whether we're working, and then use that information. And remember, garbage in, garbage out. So collect good information, make sure it's accurate, clean it up, make sure you know what's going on, and make your decisions. Okay, good luck out there.